Hello everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. This is Enoch's tutorial. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel afterwards so that you can receive every update from this channel. In today's lesson, we are going to look at the differences and even the similarities that exist between fatty acid synthesis and beta oxidation of fatty acids. So we are going to compare the two opposing pathways that exist in a single cell. Fatty acid synthesis occurs when there is excess glucose in the body, such that the body depends only on glucose for energy production, whereas beta oxidation occurs in conditions like diabetes or deficient glucose in the body, such that all the fat in the body must be broken down to release energy. The two are opposing pathways that occurs in different positions in the cell. So fatty acid synthesis occurs in the cytoplasm of the cell, whereas the beta oxidation starts from the cytoplasm and ends somewhere in the matrix of the mitochondria. Now let's look at the two pathways and how we can compare the two pathways according to the chemical or metabolic reaction that occurs along the metabolic pathways of these two pathways. Let's take first the beta oxidation of fatty acids. Now beta oxidation just implies the breakdown of fatty acids in the cytoplasm to release several molecules of acetyl-CoA for energy production through the Krebs cycle. So if you have this one as beta oxidation, or let's say this is an acyl-CoA, what happens is first there is an activation of the fatty acids in the cytoplasm to produce a fatty acyl-CoA, and the fatty acyl-CoA is transported through the mitochondrial membranes to the mitochondrial matrix before it is then activated again by a CoA enzyme to produce another acyl-CoA. The first step in the breakdown or the oxidation of fatty acids in the matrix is the oxidation. So here the oxidation in this way is just the removal of the two hydrogens on the beta and the alpha carbon. So here these two hydrogens or one from here and one from here is lost to produce an alkene, or let's say a double bond. So just as oxidation is defined also by the loss of hydrogen, when this molecule loses hydrogen atoms, we say this molecule is oxidized to form another enol. So the next step in the oxidation of fatty acids after it finds itself in the mitochondrial matrix is addition of water, which is more of a hydration. So we add water molecule to this alkene or the double bond such that the OH comes to the beta carbon, whereas the H comes to the alpha carbon. So here the OH comes here and the H comes here in the mitochondrial matrix. The next step is oxidation again. The oxidation just implies the oxidation of the hydroxy group into the ketone. So here the hydroxy group is oxidized to ketones. The first oxidation here is the removal of the hydrogens to form an alkene or let's say double bond. The second oxidation is the removal of the O here to form a double bond between this carbon, the beta carbon, and the OH or the oxygen to form a ketone. Then the next or the final step is the splitting. The splitting is just the cleavage of the bond between the alpha carbon and the beta carbon here, so that we have the first molecule of the acetyl-CoA released in the body. So this is what goes in the Krebs cycle to produce equivalent, energy equivalent, or let's say electron equivalent, the NADH and the FADH2, which gives us electron or let's say energy in the electron transport chain system. The remaining chain of the fatty acid undergo the same four pathways to cleave another one. So first there's going to be oxidation of the carbon or the alpha carbon and the beta carbon. Next one is hydration as shown here, addition of water, then oxidation again, then we have splitting or cleavage. So this is the pathway for beta oxidation after the fatty acyl-CoA is found in the mitochondrial matrix. Now let's see the opposing pathway of fatty acid synthesis when we have excess of glucose in the body. Now if we have excess glucose in the body, all the acetyl-CoAs in the body must be converted to fatty acids through the fatty acid synthesis or what we call lipogenesis so that we can store them. Now, all the fatty acid synthesis or fatty acid or the acetyl-CoA molecules are first converted to what we call malonyl-CoA. So all the fatty or the acetyl-CoA molecules are condensed with carbon dioxide to form a malonyl-CoA. Then the malonyl-CoA is just like the reactive portion which adapts to the growing chain of the fatty acid for us to get the extended fatty acid molecule. So the first reaction in fatty acid synthesis is the condensation of the malonyl CoA or the malonyl ACP to a growing chain of the fatty acid. So here it is ACP. In this case, the protein that carries the fatty acid is called the acyl carrier protein. You're going to look at in the next slide the acyl carrier protein here. So the acyl carrier protein is the protein or the complex or the subunit of the enzyme that help in fatty acid synthesis. We call it fatty acid synthase. That helps to transport the acyl protein or the acyl portion of the acetyl-CoA and the growing fatty acid. We join them to have the unit or together fatty acid chain. So here the malonyl CoA is transported to the growing fatty acid chain for us to get a unit. So we join the acetyl-CoA portion of the malonyl CoA to this for us to get this. So the first step is joining, the joining step. The next step is reduction. So we reduce the ketone here to a hydroxy, as in here, the ketone on the beta carbon to a hydroxy. Then also we lose water from here. So we lose water from the beta carbon and the alpha carbon for us to get an alkene. Then we reduce again to have a straight chain. So this is just a simplified step or simplified mechanism for the synthesis of fatty acid. Now let's see the differences of how we can compare the fatty acid and the beta oxidation. Now in the first step of beta oxidation, there is an oxidation which results in loss of hydrogen. But in the last step of fatty acid, there is reduction which results in gain of hydrogen. So from here to here, we lose hydrogen, but from here to here, we gain hydrogen. So here, the first step here is oxidation, whereas this one is reduction. The two are just opposing and very similar pathways. The next step here, from here, the alkene to the alcohol is just addition of water, whereas this step in fatty acid synthesis is just loss of water, where we lose water. So here we add water, whereas here we lose water in fatty acid synthesis. The difference is later, how we can compare the two. Next, if we take oxidation of alcohols to ketones, here we reduce ketones to alcohols, but here we reduce alcohols to ketones. So in beta oxidation, we reduce or we oxidize alcohols to ketones, but in fatty acid synthesis, we reduce ketones to alcohols. Now the final step is just splitting, whereas the first step of fatty acid synthesis is joining. So these are how we can compare the two opposing pathways. They are very similar. What is the first step here is the same as, it's just the opposite of the last step in the other. So the two are opposing pathways. Let's look at some differences that exist between them. Here the carrier protein or the enzyme that carries the molecule is called the ACP. We call it acyl carrier protein. So the acyl carrier protein does the carrying of the acyl complex of the acetyl-CoA and the growing fatty acid chain. Whereas here the CoA enzyme does the carrying. So here CoA enzyme is the carrier protein here, but here the ACP or the acyl carrier protein is the enzyme here. Let's compare them here and see the differences or the similarities that exist between them. So with beta oxidation, it occurs purposely in the mitochondrial matrix after transport of the fatty acyl-CoA from the cytoplasm to the mitochondria. It begins in the mitochondrial matrix, whereas fatty acid synthesis occurs in the cytosol. Now, beta oxidation occurs in response to a hormone we call glucagon, which is released whenever there is low blood glucose. So when there is low blood glucose, a hormone called glucagon, which is released from the beta pancreatic cells, is alpha pancreatic cells released into the bloodstream for us to activate the beta oxidation. But fatty acid synthesis occurs when there is excess glucose, which is stimulated by a hormone called insulin, which is released from the beta pancreatic cells. Here, the beta oxidation is activated by the coenzyme. So the fatty acids in the cytoplasm is activated by coenzyme. But the activator of fatty acid synthesis, or let's say the ASA malonyl CoA, is the ASA carrier protein. The initial substrate for beta oxidation is fatty acids, whereas that for fatty acid synthesis, acetyl-CoA, as shown here. The initial coenzymes are FADA, FAD, and NAD+, as seen in the pathways shown above. But the initial coenzymes for fatty acid synthesis is NADPH. The types of reaction involved in beta oxidation are oxidation, hydration, and cleavage. But for fatty acid synthesis, it is reduction, dehydration, and condensation, as we saw in the previous slide. Here, the function of the beta oxidation is to cleave two carbonyl acetyl groups. That's for beta oxidation, to cleave two carbonyl acetyl groups. But here we add two carbonyl acetyl groups in fatty acid synthesis. So here, if you have let's say beta oxidation, the final product we expect here is acetyl-CoA. After cleavage of the molecule, we must get acetyl-CoA as the final product. But for beta oxidation or fatty acid synthesis, we always get palmitate, or what we call palmitic acid, which is a fatty acid made of 16 carbon atoms or other fatty acids. Then the final coenzyme we get at the end of the reaction of beta oxidation is FADH2 and NAD. But for that of fatty acid synthesis, we get NAD P+. So there's oxidized form of the NADPH. So this is how we can compare fatty acid and beta oxidation. The two are opposing pathways that occurs in different positions in the cells based on a different level of glucose in the body, or response to different enzyme or hormones in the body, being it insulin for the case of fatty acid synthesis, or beta oxidation for the case of glucagon. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so that you can receive every update from this channel. Thank you.